Tonight marks the 90th anniversary of the day that the 19th Amendment was signed into law. And so we're celebrating together tonight this little chapel with a very big history. And it was the first time I heard about this chapel was back in 1998, and when our then director of the Park District, John O'Meara, came up to me. I was new at my position as communications specialist for the park. He said, we're looking at this little piece of land because we want to save the watershed of the Cuyahoga River. And by the way, there's also this little building on the property that the park won't own, but it's got a really big history.
There were so many things that went on in this building over its 152 years history. I have about less than 5 minutes to cover 152 years and about 35 events. That's about 6.1 seconds per event. So without further ado, and I have a cheat sheet here so I don't forget, just give you a flavor of the activity, the energy, and the verve that was going on here over the years. As far as, number one, as far as education-related issues, the building at one point was a one-room schoolhouse, and it's said to have contained the first kindergarten in the state of Ohio. Sunday school classes were held here, and there was a singing school. Believe it or not, it was also a lending library. Now, in terms of civic activities, sure, it was a voting site, at least for the men, for a while. The Newbury Memorial Association met here, and their goal was to perpetuate the struggle for political freedom. Well, so what? But the so what is that in 1919, they tried to get a hold of the title for the building, which was impossible because nobody owns this building. It does not have a deed, does not have a title. So clearly they failed, and now the building still belongs to the citizens of Newbury and nobody else. But probably the thing that the chapel is most noted for is the reform movement. Quite a few different things went on in here. There was speakers regarding workers' rights, temperance. Temperance was really the big one, temperance and prohibition. Quite a few of the national leaders at temperance spoke here, including John Geauga. Nobody heard of John. Anybody hear of John Geauga? His name is on the rock there on the plaque. Today nobody knows about him, but in the 1880s he was one of the most popular speakers in the country. In fact, he was actually was called the most popular speaker on temperance in both the United States and Great Britain. He actually parlayed that into a pretty good business because he got paid for each of his speeches, which drew tens of thousands of people, and he was given credit for converting quite a few of these folks to the way of prohibition. And one wag at the time called him the poet of delirium tremors.
Conspire before on our remarks because I was going to open mine with "Cumber me with sweeping skirts and iron bands and steel hoops." The women's dress reform movement formed here at the chapel in 1870. By January of 1874, just 3 years later, it had morphed into a full-blown women's suffrage organization, the Newbury Women's Political Suffrage Club. So what makes the little suffrage club here in South Newbury unique? It was not the first. Other clubs in the state had formed a few years prior in cities like Cincinnati, Toledo, Dayton, Akron, Cleveland. I think this club is unique for two reasons, primarily. You have to consider that that South Newbury was a very, very small community. Compare it to the cities that I just rattled off. And people in those times were not as connected as we are and ours. In fact, it lasted even longer. After the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920, the Suffrage Club renamed itself the Newbury Memorial Association, and they continued to meet here the last Saturday of every month, all the way to 1931, when the plaque and stone was dedicated. All the way back to October of 1871, when it was still a dress reform society, women came here and tried to cast their votes. Of course, they were refused every single time. It's reported in the history that they came for the next 5 years and tried to vote in every local, state, and national election, and were denied the vote every single time. I cannot find anywhere in my research women any earlier in the state trying to make their voices heard. November of 1920, the nation would elect an Ohio native son, Warren G. Harding. After the election, the Geauga County leader on November 9th, 1920, reported that 214 votes were cast in Newbury, and 100 of them were from women. This time, the votes counted.
At the age of 18, James Garfield was baptized at a disciples' meeting near his home in Orange Township. Some say it was in a farm pond, others say it was in the Chagrin River, but Garfield reports the date, March 3rd, 1850. Disciples regularly baptized during winter weather. The prevailing feeling among them was that if the heart is right and warm, ice and cold can do no harm. This seems to me to be a test of faith. Brother Garfield began speaking at disciples' meetings soon after that, and during the years that he studied at the Eclectic and at Williams College, he honed his oratorical and debating skills.
Popularity with the familiarity with the Washington political scene, she was a natural to represent the cause of women's suffrage. And in 1890, Harriet committed herself completely to the suffrage movement. For the next 30 years, she was dedicated to the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. She worked closely with her mentor, Susan B. Anthony, and the other early suffragists, although she was from the next generation. Susan B. Anthony was more like a mother to her. In fact, they called Susan B. Anthony Mother Susan.
A very personal reason for an interest in this chapel and in this marker. My mom is a retired elected office holder where I grew up in Putnam County, Ohio. And so I like to think that the work that these women did here and suffragettes did all over the United States made it possible for her to become an elected official in a tiny county in northwest Ohio. So it's my pleasure to be here, and congratulations on erecting this marker. I would like to call up representatives from the Union Chapel trustees in the Geauga Park District to present a commendation on behalf of the Ohio Historical Society, and then we'll see what it looks like. So can I have some representatives from the understanding of our state's heritage by placing an Ohio historical marker on August the 26th, 2010, which honors the history of the South Newbury Union Chapel, also known as the Cradle of Equal Suffrage and the Free Speech Chapel, for its role as a meeting place for crusaders for many causes in late 19th century America, including women's dress reform, temperance, and women's suffrage. Signed, Bert Logan, Executive Director of the Ohio Historical Society, and Richard T. Prossie, the President of the Board of Trustees. Congratulations.
Paige shared a little story with me today that she found on the internet. It was reported that 90 years ago today, when Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby signed the proclamation for the 19th Amendment, there was no fanfare, there were no media around, no suffragists standing there. He simply signed the paper and he said, I turn to the women of America and say, you may now fire when you are ready. You have been enfranchised. So I say, young ladies, retire the flag.